everyone. Thanks a lot for the invitation to the conference. I decided to explore the topic of students' motivation in distant education, as we know that the motivation to learn the language has always been an important issue, and especially now, in the situation that is quite a novelty that was a novelty to each of us at the beginning of the previous year, the question of motivation became something that got a new phase. In order to analyze the topic, let's have a look at the basic meaning of and understanding the most primitive, I would say, concept, definition of the concept of motivation. So as the dictionary says, it is the willingness to do something or something that causes such willingness. After Dorney and Ryan, we can say that without sufficient motivation, even individuals with the most remarkable abilities cannot accomplish long-term goals. And on the other hand, high motivation can make up for considerable deficiencies in both one's language aptitude and learning conditions. So that is the thing that especially in the face of distant teaching, distant learning becomes an issue. As teachers, teachers have to really pay attention to motivating students and keep their motivation level high all the time. This is important if you just have a look at a couple of points that scientists point out when it comes to definitions of motivation. So after Shelley, it is the process that initiates, guides, and maintains goal-oriented behaviors. And Shelley also points out that motivation is complex, and it involves both biological, emotional, social, and cognitive forces. Dorney points out to the dynamic factor, to the dynamic nature of motivation, and its changes and its relation to emotion as well. Nevitt goes on that factors that activate, direct, and sustain goal-directed behavior should be called motivation, and then he goes into explaining that motives are the whys of behavior, so the needs are the ones that drive behavior, and explain what we do and how intensively we do that. Deci and Ryan say that to be motivated means to be moved to do something, and then keep the energy and keep doing the thing, not just start doing that. Following these definitions, we can look at the three phases of that. So first of all, the idea of the concept of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. The idea of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation was first mentioned already at the beginning of the 20th century. This was 1918. Woodworth introduced the idea, and he distinguished between intrinsic motivation as the one that is the activity running by its own drive, and the external one driven by some extrinsic motive, something from outside. Basically, these understandings have not changed. We all know that the things that involve intrinsic motivation make us involved in the activity, they make us interested, make the activity enjoyable, while the ones that are involved with the extrinsic motivation, we do the activities because they lead to a separable income that is not actually part of us, but that is a reward by itself. When it comes to the dynamic nature of motivation, it is important to see that we have experienced some changes in understanding this aspect of motivation. In 1990s, it was believed that motivation is there. So Gardner treated this as a factor, as a feature that was potentially stable. It existed, and not much could be done to influence that. At the moment, we understand that motivation is dynamic and it has phases. We can distinguish between 3 phases of motivation. That is the pre-action phase, which makes us involved in the activity. Then we've got actional phase, and this is the level where we maintain doing an activity, when we perform the activity, and this is the force that makes us going within the activity. And the post-actional phase, when we refer to the activities that have been completed and which involve retrospection and evaluation of the activity that has been performed. Also, what has to be noticed is the close connection between motivation and emotion. Understanding the nature of motivation and understanding the nature of emotions is crucial to educators. Both emotions and motivation are dynamic. Both do not stay at the same level. They are not the permanent feature of a language learner. Both change with time, and as they fluctuate, we can have many reasons that can influence both emotions and motivation. And as we understand, any feature that is happening within the school life can change the motivation and emotions of the students, whether this is the change of the school itself, the change of the teacher, the form of giving instructions. All these factors can affect students' motivation to learn the language. So the situation that happened in the spring 2020 must have affected students' motivation. The situation was new to both students and teachers. Teachers were forced to switch into distance education, to teaching through ICT, to incorporate computers into their teaching processes almost overnight. Before that, before we got into the distant education mode, to do a great simplification, we could divide teachers into 3 broad groups. This was group 1, and this was the group of teachers who incorporated ICT into regular teaching practices before the pandemic started. So these were the ones who made friends with ICT and for whom ICT was not a novelty. Group 2, including the ones who occasionally turned into ICT, but were not really fans of widespread application of technology. And we also had group 3, the teachers who rejected ICT and followed the traditional teaching processes. It also has to be mentioned that before the pandemic started, there was no unified front between educational officials, whether technology and internet, and to what extent technology and internet and smartphones should be applied and restricted in schools. There were even a few schools that introduced a complete ban on mobile devices. This was the reality between the spring of 2020. What happened then was that the things that were forbidden became the reality. Previously, some students were not allowed to use smartphones in the school, at the school premises, and then it appeared that they had school in their phones, to a great simplification. So teachers faced the difficult task. How about students? We all think that, okay, they are representatives of Generation Z, they are the digital natives, they are supposed to find the virtual classroom a friendly environment. However, it appeared that it was a false pre-assumption. Many students did not cope successfully with technical obstacles they encountered. Many faced serious problems because of isolation, because of being left only with technology, and some even disappeared from education completely. The numbers are not given, but for spring 2020, it was counted as a couple of thousands of students in Poland disappeared from the educational system. So the situation was a bit difficult for everyone. Because of that, this novelty of the situation encouraged me to look into that. I decided to conduct a research, analyzing and looking into the situation of teaching and learning languages, and especially looking at students' motivation to learn the language in distant education. I focus basically on language education, as focusing on the general aspect of education would give perhaps a broader picture, but a picture that would not be that precise. In my research, I managed to get responses from almost 400 school students. These were secondary school students from the north of Poland. The research was conducted in May and June of 2020, and it was performed in the form of an online questionnaire consisting of 23 questions. When it comes to the results of the questionnaire, one of the first questions referred to students' evaluation of quality of distant education. And as you can see on the screen, majority of students, it is as many as almost 3/4, that's 73% of the students were at least moderately satisfied with online teaching. As I'm saying, this data refers only to language teaching and language learning. This is not teaching and learning. That does not refer to teaching other subjects. What is also quite satisfactory, only 3% of the participants expressed strong dissatisfaction with online education. When it comes to the forms of instruction used in distant education, we can see that most of the work in spring 2020 was done with the use of worksheets and exercises that students had to do on their own, but also most students took part in online lessons. They obviously, half of them took online tests and online quizzes, but also other activities like educational platforms, the use of online course books, and another task was applied. The good point in here, and the good piece of information, is that almost all students were involved in online lessons. There was only about 5% of the students who did not take part in online lessons. So that's a good result for language teachers. When it comes to the communication with the language teachers in distant education, when you look at the numbers, most of the students said it was very good, or at least good. There were a few students for whom the communication was poor or bad, but that's the result. The overall result is really satisfactory. Great majority of the students participating in the questionnaire was satisfied with the communication with their language teachers. When comparing the communication in distant education to communication in traditional classroom, However, there were students who claimed that it was more difficult in online teaching. So, for 12% of the students, it was more complicated. It was more difficult than in the real classroom, probably because of the lack of the face-to-face contact. However, again, great majority of the students said that it was good, and it was as good as usual. If we look at the two highest results in here, that's good as usual, and a bit worse, but still okay. So as language teachers, I think we can be pretty satisfied with the quality, with our students' evaluation of the quality of our communication with them. When it comes to students' motivation in online education and in the traditional classroom, when the red line illustrates motivation in online education and the blue one in the traditional classroom, and when you just note that on the left side you've got not motivated at all, the other end of the continuum very well motivated. So the blue line definitely takes the lead. So there were fewer students who were highly motivated in distant education, and and in the traditional classroom there are definitely fewer students who are poorly motivated or not motivated at all. So in here, definitely students say that their motivation is higher in the traditional classroom. And when it comes to what motivates our students, what is first of all, what is difficult for our student in distant education, when we compare the difficulty of different tasks in education in the classroom and in the education that is performed online. 6% say the tasks were easier, the tasks are easy, and the tasks are more complex in the traditional classroom. Majority of the students, that's again 3/4, say that that difficulty of the tasks is about the same in both types of education. However, when it comes to the level of understanding, there is a difference. We have 16 or 17% of students who say that the understanding is not really the highest, so they understand less in the traditional classroom than in online teaching. On the other hand, we've got 18% of the students who say that their understanding was higher. When we look at the third factor, the level of remembering, in here the situation definitely looks worse. We have almost 10% of survey participants who say that they remember less in distant education, and only 5% of the students who say that they remember more from distant education. So there are students who remember more, but the number is definitely not as high as when it comes to the previous questions. The good piece of information and something and the field where distant education looks really successful is the level of students' consistency in learning. 10% again say that their consistency level was lower, that it was more difficult for them to do the tasks on time, but we've got 13, almost 14% of research participants who say that it was easier for them to do tasks on time. And if we have a look at the global number, the students who answered, who gave the 4, 5, and 6, so the upper half of the scale, this is more than 50% of research participants. This is I think the best piece of information, the best piece of the strongest quality of distance education. And now in here the things that motivate students in distant education. This is as you can see, traditional classroom scores higher in usefulness of English, surprisingly, and in the ability to communicate. And the only reason, the only factor that scores definitely higher in distant education than in the traditional classroom, that's the grade. Summarizing, concluding, so students tend to work on the good side of distance education. Students tend to work on their language skills with more consistency. They also indicated that it was easier for them to work on development of reading and writing skills. And the increase in the extrinsic motivation in the role of the grade. This is on the good side. And then again, a bit surprisingly, spoken channel was indicated as the one where students did not feel too much supported. Certain decrease in students' intrinsic motivation had to be noted, and also diminished influence of external motivators other than the grade. And that's it from me. Thanks a lot.